Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Victoria, and if you are watching this on the day that it came out, December 2nd, it is my birthday today. Recently, I saw Michae for her birthday, which was a couple of weeks ago, do a video where she talked about books that she has loved over her 26 years of life. I am 24 today, and I loved watching Michae's video, and so I thought that I would do something similar, which is 24 books that I have loved or that have impacted me or that are just ones that made a lasting impression throughout my 24 years of life. So I have a whole bunch stacked in front of me, which you cannot see, and I'm going to go through all 24 of them and share them with you and have little like stories or anecdotes about each one. I have a lot from the last 3 to 4 years because for a very large period of my life, i.e. college, I did not read anything. I started reading again for pleasure in senior year of college. I was just so freaking busy. The only thing I read for my entire college career was basically sociological journals. So they are in no particular order. They are just ones that popped into my head. So I'm just gonna be picking them up and showing them to you, and we're gonna just get into it. Okay, so the first one is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. This book, I read it right when it came out, which I believe was like when I first started reading again, because I think I read it in college. So I think that this is one of the first books. Yeah, 2019, so I was a senior in college when I read this book. This is one of the books that I had to pick up when I got back into reading as a senior. I had a friend that lived upstairs from me in my apartment senior year of college, and she loved reading, and we worked together and we bonded over reading, and then we talked about books all the time, and just talking about books with her made me want to go looking for new books, wanted to read again. She said, hey, there's this new book that just came out that I just read and loved, you should read it. And she let me borrow her copy of Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I read it and I loved it, and then we talked about it a ton. If you don't know, this book is about a first son of the United States who falls in love with the Prince of Wales, and it is forbidden. They're not allowed. It's politically not correct, but it is about discovering your sexual identity, discovering yourself, being who you want to be, being your authentic self, and I really, really loved it, and it was fantastic, and I still love it despite all of so many people have criticisms about this book. I still love it. And it was one of the books that got me back into being excited about reading. Alright, the next one that I have is Strength by Amy Dawes. This one I believe I read in 2021, and this one is technically the first book in the Harris brothers world because it is the Harris sister. Her story takes place before the actual Harris brothers stories, but it is Vi Harris, and this story is a beautiful, beautiful story about mental health. It has so many trigger warnings in this for suicide and depression and loss of a loved one. So much going on in this story, but Vi's mother died when she was young, and she became basically the responsible female presence in the house of her, 4 or 5 brothers, and her father couldn't handle it. He threw his whole life into soccer. The whole family became very dedicated to soccer, and Vi just has a lot of baggage from it. And her brothers are professional soccer players now, and it makes it even more difficult for her to date with the baggage that she has, and also the fact that her brothers are professional athletes and well known in her city. And she ends up meeting and later falling in love with a guy named Hayden, who is incredibly broody. He's so troubled. He has serious mental health problems. His sister died and he feels very responsible for it. He has attempted suicide himself, and he has had a drug problem in the past. He has a lot of things going on. But he has gotten to a point where he's starting to come out of the really dark place, but he still struggles with it a lot. And he meets Vi, and they connect over some of the very troubled things that they've dealt with, or baggage, or emotions that they carry. And it becomes a really beautiful story because Vi very much sees who he wants to be and who he thinks he can be but is struggling with, and Vi really helps him get out of that dark place. They really help each other be more confident and happy and just having a good life. And it's just a beautiful story. It deals so much with mental health and the struggles that you go with and feeling guilt, and I really loved it. And I've had my own mental health struggles, so I really loved how Vi dealt with it and how Hayden dealt with it, and I was very moved by it. Okay, another one that we have is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. So back when I was a senior in college and rediscovering the world of books, I took to the internet like a lot of people do, and I went looking for new books to read. And I came across this thing called BookTube, and I found the channel of Jess from Peace Love Books and Lacey from Lacey Book Lovers. And I started following them and reading the books that they recommended and saying, hey, those sound really good. And one that Lacey was recommending that she talked a lot about was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. And so this was one of my first indie romances that I read. I got Audible Escape back in the day, and I read the audiobook of The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. This was my first Mariana Zapata. It was one of my first indie romances, and it is about a heroine who works for her boss, who is the professional footballer Aiden Graves, and she can't stand him anymore, and she's like, I'm gonna quit. And he doesn't realize how much he needs her, and so he comes groveling back and says, please be my personal assistant again. And she's like, hell fucking no. And he says, I will pay off your student debt and all your debt that you have and buy you a house if you marry me so that I can stay in the country, because he's actually Canadian, and he needs to stay in America to play football. And so he's like, hey, don't be my personal assistant again, instead be my wife, move back in with me, you're the only person I know that I can stand. And she's like, I can't refuse him paying off all that stuff. And so she takes him up on his offer, and it is a marriage of convenience, and then they fall in love. And I loved it. Loved it. So good. It's very long, it's very slow burn, but it's really good. Let's do a historical. This one is the first historical that I ever read, and that is The Duchess Steele by Tessa Dare. I got Scribd, and I listened to this whole series while I would walk to and from my apartment to campus, and I freaking loved it. I was shocked that books with sex existed. I was like, this is a real thing. I'm in love with this. Let's do it. Why did I not know this was a thing before? I was the person who read everything on like Wattpad and like AO3 and fan fictions and stuff like that. Like I read after before it was after, when it was on Wattpad. So I had been reading all of these like stories and stuff that included like smut in them, and I was like, that can't be a real thing. That's why they hide it on Wattpad and stuff. And then I found books like this where it had sex right on the page, and I was shocked. I loved it. This story itself, outside of just the sex, was wonderful. It is again, marriage of convenience. I really love my marriages of convenience. But it is about a heroine who's supposed to make the wedding dress for this guy and for his wedding, and his wedding gets called off, and she's like, I still needs to be paid. And so she walks over there in the wedding dress, knocks on his door, and is like, hey, you bought this wedding dress, you need to pay for it. And he's like, I need a wife, will you marry me? And so they get married. And they fall in love. He's a scarred hero. He has a scar on his face. He doesn't think anyone's gonna love him. But she falls in love with him, and it's beautiful. And I loved it. And now I read a lot of historicals because of this book. One that I have from before college, when I was a big reader, is Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. I loved Cassandra Clare when I was in middle school. I read everything that she wrote. I read all of her books up until, I can't even remember when I stopped. Probably freshman year of college when I stopped reading as much. But I was a huge Cassandra Clare fan back in the day, and I loved her books. I read the whole City of Bones series. I read all of the Shadowhunter Chronicles, and this series was my favorite. The Clockwork series, whatever this series is called, I can't even remember anymore. I adored these books, and I almost got a Shadowhunter tattoo. I didn't, but I almost did when I was in Ireland with a friend. But I did not actually go through with it. But this series meant a lot to me. It was very impactful for my actual reading tastes, for my actual reading ability. It made me excited about reading. It was something that I never had seen or done before. I made my brother read the whole series so that we could talk about it. And I really, really loved it. And Will Herondale was my like original book boyfriend, like one of my like all-time original book boyfriends. I loved him. And we have another one that's actually from when I was younger, and this one is Die For Me by Amy Plum. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this book, but this one is a paranormal romance where it takes place in France, in Paris, and I was obsessed with Paris as a child. I still am obsessed with Paris. I've been there 3 times now. When I was studying abroad for 6 months, I went to Paris 3 times. I absolutely love France, and this book helped fuel my France obsession. But this one is about a heroine whose parents have died, and she moves to France to live with her grandparents, and she meets this guy named Vincent, who turns out to be a revenant, where if you die in the service of somebody saving somebody else, some people turn into revenants, and then you die for other people for the rest of your life, basically. And so he can live normally as a human, but every once in a while he goes and he dies in place of somebody else, and then 3 days later comes back to life, basically. And she finds out about this, and they fall in love, and it's very not okay. The Revenants are like fighting a war with this like other evil group of people, and I was so hooked on this series. I was obsessed with this series. There are 3 books. I still own all of them. I actually reread them recently. It was like not that recently. It was like 5 years ago. When I got back into reading again, I read them again, but I really love them still, and they were so important to my reading tastes. I took French in middle school, and when I was in 6th or 7th grade, my teacher yelled at me for reading in class because she was like, you need to pay attention. The only books you're allowed to read in here are in French. And I was a sassy child and came back the next day to class with this book, reading it, and she was like, Victoria, you're not allowed to read in class, and there are a couple of lines in this book that are in French, and I said, ha, you said I could read it if it was in French. Like I said, I was a sassy child, but I loved it so much, and it was very, very important for my growth of reading. Okay, let's do this one, Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan. This one was my first Kennedy Ryan. I was unprepared beyond belief. Going into this, I was like, ooh, sweet romance, sports romance. I'm a big sports romance fan, and so I was like, sports romance. No. It is so emotional and impactful. It deals with so many trigger warnings, the main one being domestic violence. The heroine is a victim of domestic violence. She's a domestic violence survivor, and she struggles through the book. You see the actual domestic violence happening to her, the manipulation, the coercion, the horrible things that her awful husband does to her. and it's just awful, and it makes you really, really, really change your perspective on domestic violence, and how a lot of times when domestic violence happens and domestic violence survivors, there are people who still are like, why didn't she just leave? This shows you why it's not that easy, and it's never that easy, and it's not just black and white, and you have to protect yourself, you have to protect your children. She has a child, and it makes it very, very, very difficult to escape her situation, and it makes you really think about life. And this book is one that's actually taught in college classes now. I study women's and gender studies in college, and this is one that is now talked about in colleges. I actually talked to one of my professors when I was in college under my women's and gender studies branch. I took a class called The Psychology of Sexual and Domestic Violence, and I actually, after reading this book, reached out to my professor, and we were talking, and she had read it already, and we were talking about it because I brought up things that we had talked about in class, and it was just it's so important. It is one that I will probably never, ever, ever, ever reread because it is hard, but I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars, and it's worthy, and she did her research, and she did such a good job with it. It's one of those ones that, like, you can't not think about it later. It changes how you view life. Okay, later note, Always Only You by Chloe Leese is another one. This one was the first book that I read where I really connected to the character in terms of chronic illness. I have chronic pain. I deal with chronic pain every single day. I have multiple chronic illnesses, and reading this book, Always Only You, where Frankie, the heroine, has rheumatoid arthritis and deals with chronic pain, was something that I had never seen before or experienced before, where it's not something that a lot of people talk about. And having it in a romance specifically, and in a romance with a hero being so incredibly sweet and understanding and willing to change parts of his life in order to fit what she needs, was very impactful for me, because it was something that I had never seen before and was worried about. And so I very, very much appreciate what Chloe Leese did in this book, the time that she took to research and understand the different chronic illnesses and explain chronic pain in a way that's incredibly well done. Next one that I have is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. This is the edition that I pulled off my shelf. If you do not know, I collect editions of Pride and Prejudice. I have an entire shelf of different Pride and Prejudice editions. Some of them are very, very old. Some of them are very beautiful covers and everything, but I absolutely adore Pride and Prejudice. It is one of the only classics that I love. I do not have a whole bunch to say about it, but I basically read it every couple of years, reread it every couple of years, because I still love it. The movies, and I've seen like every adaptation of the movies, and I love all of them too. I just think it's a beautiful story. Okay, the next one that we have, House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. This is my favorite Sarah J. Maas book. I know that a lot of people's favorite Sarah J. Maas book is The Court of Mist and Fury, and that one is very up there for me. But this book, when I read this book, my life was just like changed. I have reread this very, very long book maybe 5-6 times. I adore it from start to finish. I was not bored. I was not lost. I was fully encapsulated the entire way. I, like I said, have read it 5 or 6 times, and I still sob during the last one specific scene at the end where the little tabs are. But this book is amazing. I think it talks about grief so well. It's so interesting and intricate. It is the fantasy that I love. It is so well done, so beautiful, and I adore this story so much. This is one that I actually will get a tattoo of. I've had it planned for since I read this book. I love Bryce so much, and I really, Bryce is one of the characters that I relate to a lot, and I think that she's awesome. So, speaking of characters that I relate to, Forbidden by Carla Sorensen. This one is one of the ones, this was probably my favorite book of last year, I think. And this one is about a girl named Isabel who I relate to so incredibly much. This one is one of the, I always relate to the not so nice heroines, the prickly, bitchy, hard shelled heroines like Bryce Quinlan, who hides all her pain, or Isabel Ward, or Nesta Archeron, or Riona Griffin, or the ones like that who have very hard shells, who don't wear their emotions on their sleeves, who really need somebody to help them let their walls down and feel safe in order to be vulnerable. And I love them, and they are me. And Isabel is one that really, really was me, is me. And I had never related really to a heroine as much as I related to Isabel, and I love her. I love this story, and seeing yourself in a romance is so important, and I think that that's what a lot of these books are, is that being able to identify yourself with the characters and knowing that like you can have a romance, or that you, the parts of yourself that are hard or not perfect, also deserve love. And I think that that is one of the things that I love about this book. Let's do this one. I just threw it on the floor. Okay, Him and Us Duet by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. If you've been on my channel a lot, you know that I've talked about these books ad nauseum. I talk about these all the fucking time. They are some of my favorite books in the entire world. I adore them so, so much. It is an MM hockey, it's friends to lovers romance, and I will protect Wes and Jamie with my life to the grave. They are my loves of my life. I adore them so fucking much, and if I hear a bad thing said about them, you are wrong. Okay? Okay. Next one, Never Seduce a Scot by Maya Banks. We have another historical. This one is about Evelyn and Graham. It is a rival families romance that I love. Evelyn is deaf, and she everyone thinks she's crazy, and Graham is an absolute sweetheart hero who protects Evelyn with his life, even though she is from the rival clan of his and it was arranged marriage. When he finds out that he has to marry her, he is all in. He's like, she's my wife, I will protect her. It does not matter who her family used to be. She is my wife now, and that is the most important. Nobody will hurt her, nobody will touch her, and I will not take another. And I just think that he is an amazing hero. Their romance is so beautiful. I loved this book with my whole heart. The quotes in this book are amazing. They are just so incredibly stunning. The writing is beautiful, and I love it. Juniper Hill by Devaney Perry. Again, another one that I talk about a shit ton. This one specifically is one that I talked about a lot this year because I read it this year, and it's going to be on my top reads of the year. Surprise, if you didn't already know that. This one is absolutely amazing. I adore it. Again, I talk about this a lot, so I'm not going to go into so much depth about this one, but this is the one where it's the little moments, it's not the grand gestures, the small things mean the most in this book. Memphis and Knox are so beautiful. Their romance is amazing. I love the grumpiness of Knox. I love the determination of Memphis. I love the just like sweetness, utter sweetness of this romance, and it is one of my all-time favorites. Let's do this one. Welcome to the Dark Side by Gianna Darling. Okay, if some of the other ones that I mentioned were my intros to indie romance, Welcome to the Dark Side was my intro into dark romance. I read this book on the recommendation from Jess from Hazel of Books channel, probably. I was so fucking nervous, and I was so fucking glad that I read it. I have the hiccups. I adored it with my whole heart. I love Lou, I love Zeus, I love their romance. It is so incredibly well done. It is so much more than just a dark romance. The motorcycle club, the age gap are all the things that people see on the surface when they read the description. It turns them away from it and makes them think this book is going to be terrible and taboo and awful. And yes, it's taboo. Yes, their age gap relationship is very large. But the romance and the moments that they give to each other are stunning. They're beautiful. Gianna Darling's writing is poetic and lovely. It's done so incredibly well, and I love it with my whole heart. And I read a lot of dark romance since then, so obviously it helped. Next up we have Smitten by Lauren Rowe. This one is a rock star romance. It is a sweet romance. It is another one that I mentioned a lot on my channel. It is one where the hero is just wants somebody to love him for him, and the heroine comes along and she does just exactly that. She loves him for who he is as a person and not for who he is as a rock star and a celebrity. And it's a beautiful, very, very sweet romance where, again, it's just like with Juniper Hill, it is the sweet small moments in this one. The relationship builds so beautifully. It's so cute and just like gushy, you know, like that sweet sweetness. Another one that I have is The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. This one is another one from childhood. My mom actually read me and my younger brother the entirety of the Percy Jackson series. I then reread them after she was done reading them to us when I was a little bit older. I have read them since then. I love this whole series. I'm so freaking excited for the TV show to come out on Disney+. The movie did not do it justice. I absolutely love the story. I love Percy and Annabeth and Grover, and I love everything that they did. I've read it so many times and I still freaking love it. It is one of those ones that just shaped my childhood and my reading tastes as I grew through middle school and high school, and I stand by it. Okay, we have The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This one is another one that was on my top books of the year, I think in 2020. And this one is a very, very sweet story, a very fantastical, whimsical story. It is not really a romance, although there is a romance in it. It is a beautiful, fantastical story about a man who is basically like a paper pusher who all he does is he works for like a government agency. He very much follows the rules, very much to the letter, until he gets an assignment at this orphanage, magical orphanage, where he meets the caretaker of the orphanage or the head of the orphanage, and he meets all of the children that are in the orphanage, and his eyes are forever changed and opened by the fact that sometimes just because it's in the rules doesn't mean that that's what's right. And he has his mind opened, his life changed, and it is so beautiful and so well done and magical and fantastical and whimsical and amazing. Okay, like I said, I am very much like Riona Griffin, and that is why Broken Vow is on this list. Broken Vow is another one that I read this year that's going to end up on my top books of the year. I adore Broken Vow. Riona and Ryland are perfect together. This book is a mafia romance that I have talked about a lot, but it's because I love it so freaking much. Riona is me. Like I said, I love books that I can see myself in the characters, and it rarely happens. It's not something that's every single book that I read I can see myself in the characters. No, it is my, like I said, the same heroines, the same type of heroines that I see, and are not ones that are written very often because they're usually the bitchy, prickly, not so nice ones, and Riona is the perfect example of that. She is hard-shelled. She does not let people in all the way until Ryland comes. He is the perfect sunshine to her grumpy, and he comes in and he goes after her, he protects her, he helps her let her walls down, and he helps her be vulnerable and still feel safe with him, and I love it. The next one is Hush Hush by Becca Fitzpatrick. This is another one that I had from middle school. This is a book that I read in 6th grade this is the book that got me into reading, period, reading in general. I hated reading when I was in elementary school. I It was just the worst thing that you could possibly do to tell me that I had to read. Until I got to 6th grade, I met a girl named Rachel. We became really good friends, and she said, hey, have you ever read this book? And I said, reading sucks. And she said, no, it doesn't, read this book. So I went home and I read this book, and I read it in one day, which was unheard of for me. My parents freaked out. And I went to her the next day and I said, what else you got for me? I freaking loved it. It was amazing. It's a fallen angel romance. I was obsessed with it for a very fucking long time, and it is what made me excited to read books, where I was like, why have I been reading these crappy ass books in school? Why don't they teach us this one? Okay, the next one that I have, I do not have a physical copy of it, which breaks my heart. And it's another one that's going to be on my top books of the year this year, and it's actually a fan fiction, and that's Manacled, another one that I've talked about multiple times on my channel. It is a Hermione fan fiction by SenLinYu. You can get it on AO3 or Archive of Our Own, and it is an amazing story. It is what would happen if Dumbledore won the war. Harry Potter is dead. All of the resistance is dead, basically, except for Hermione. Hermione is captured by Voldemort and the Death Eaters, and she is put into this program, which is basically kind of like Handmaid's Tale, where she is given to Draco by Voldemort to be his handmaiden and to repopulate the magical world. It is dark. There are so many trigger warnings, but it is amazing. It is so well done. It is so long, and I read it so quickly, and it is one that sticks in your head. It is every single day since I read it, which was earlier this year, very earlier this year. Every single day since then I have thought about it, and it is constantly on my mind. It changed your perspective of the world. It just makes you think so much. It is devastating and amazing, and it is so good. It's so good. I would die for a physical copy, honestly. I've tried so hard to get one. It's so hard. The next one that I have is The Forbidden Man by Karina Halley. This is one book that I don't know why it stuck with me so much, but I just love it so much. I recommend it on my channel whenever I can, which isn't that often. I'm not able to fit it in as many videos as I would like, but I talk about it as much as I can. It is a sports romance, forbidden sports romance with an older woman and a younger man. The older woman is the physical therapist, basically, for the team Real Madrid, and the younger man is a player, Alejo, on the team, and they have a forbidden taboo romance, and they fall in love, and Alejo is so all in on Talia, the heroine, and it is so cute. And I don't really know what it is about this book that it stuck with me so much, but I love it so much. Okay, we have one last one. It is another one with a character that I relate to, with a story that made me so excited, and that is, I should have grabbed the other copy, but that is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is Nesta and Cassian's book. Nesta is the character from A Court of Thorns and Roses series that everyone, when they first read that series and we were talking about it and I would hear people talk about it, they were like, I love the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, but Nesta is such a bitch. And I was like, Nesta is the character that I relate to in that series. I love Nesta. I have always loved Nesta. She never bothered me. I've always been able to like look at her and say, oh, I get why she is the way she is, and I just like understand her. And this book just confirmed everything that I had already known about why Nesta is the way she is, and this book was done so incredibly well. It also deals with trauma and PTSD so incredibly well. The emotions that Nesta deals with in the aftermath of the war is fantastic. The not dealing with things in the way that other people think that you should deal with things is very prevalent in this book, and Nesta is hard. She is a hard character. She is a hard person, and she doesn't make things easy for other people. She doesn't, and I don't think that she should have to. I think that she does a very good job of, or Sarah J. Maas does a very good job of breaking down and getting people to understand why Nesta is the way that she is, and realize and Nesta and Cassian's romance is so well done in a way that Cassian does not take the fire from Nesta. He doesn't tame her in any way, but he helps her learn how to control it and to use it in the right ways. I think that is awesome. And I loved it. That was the last one, though. That is all of the ones that I was going to talk to you about. 24 books that basically represent my life over 24 years, and I hope that you enjoyed this. I'm sorry it was so long. You know me, I talk a lot about the books. I'm very passionate about these books. Obviously, when I'm talking about my favorites, I have so much more to say. But that's going to be it for this video. So please let me know down in the comments how you feel about these books. What is a book that would represent you? That's going to be it. So I hope that you like this video, and I hope that you'll subscribe and stick around so you can see more content from me. But other than that, I hope that you have the best day. Bye!